Hopefully we got this button down here. All right, let's get rocking, rolling.
I got the email, thank you.
You betcha. All right, we'll start with the buyer one since that's the way it went out to you guys. So yeah, we're gonna go right through it. Haven't stopped any time along the way. So we buyers, whoever they are, appoint you brokerage firm, Keller Williams Legacy Partners. And we're going to be representing them to purchase or exchange real property, and we're going to describe it as, and so your choices go on the widest bandwidth, real property, state of Connecticut. That means anything they buy, whether it's a single family, a condo, multifamily, state of Connecticut, our contract relationship with them would be valid. The narrowest, taking that down a few pegs, would be one property. And it could be anything in between. It could be properties in Hartford County. It could be specific towns. It could, it could be all kinds of things depending on what your relationship is going to be with these people who are there. You're going to be more apt for people that you know and have some relationship with. You're going to be more apt to do the real property state of Connecticut thing. And people maybe you don't know, and they're getting to know you, you're getting to know them, and you can kind of feel each other out. Do we want to work with each other, or we don't necessarily? Then we might do it for, just specific properties that we might be showing them on a particular day. And the idea of that would be the potential of enhancing the relationship. You don't want to do the property by property, day by day thing very long at all. Once or twice, maybe, after that, your time is precious and they have to be making willingly committing to this partnership and working with us. Otherwise, right. Make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. We will tell you about all past and current contacts with any real property and any brokerage agreements currently in effect. During the term of this contract, we will work exclusively through you in locating and purchasing or exchanging real property as described above, and they're going to put their initials in there. So this is our opportunity here to have more in-depth conversation with these people. Have they been out looking at property previously? Do they have any written agreements with any brokers now or in the recent past? Oh yeah, I think we signed something, but I think it was only for one property. Yeah, do you have a copy of it? No, I don't have a copy of it. Can you tell me who the agent is that you were out with? And hopefully, we need to probe, because for you guys to sign them up to a buyer representation agreement, start spending your time and going out in the marketplace, only 3 weeks later, a month later, getting a call from some other broker that says, I have an existing buyer contract relationship with these people. Because people sometimes, they don't know what they've signed, and they don't remember if they signed anything. So, and if somebody has said that they have literally been out and looked at some properties, the sort of the flags have to go up. I need to know more. I need to know more. Occasionally, believe it or not, occasionally people will look you right in the eye and lie to you because they don't like that other realtor. They don't want to be encumbered by them in any way, shape, or form. So they'll tell you they don't have any relationship. The point of this is to make sure we have good conversations with people, set the stage so that if we're going to sign them up, we have a legitimate buyer to be signing a legitimate buyer rep agreement with, right?
I think I saw somewhere where GAR or NAR, they're saying that we have to sign one, like come in July or August or something about.
Well, I was just gonna go there, so I'm segueing right into that part of the conversation. State of Connecticut, our real estate contract laws, licensing laws have required that we have buyer agreements since the 1990s. That's not true of everywhere in the country. All right, so sometimes when you see a NAR thing, it's not specific to Connecticut. But here's the second half of this. So I think it's probably 1997 thereabouts. I can tell you, out of the 21,000 realtors in the state of Connecticut who are running around with buyers, probably half of them don't have them sign in. So, and they're in violation of their licensing laws. So, because you're gonna potentially get that conversation, the buyer says, well, I've looked at a bunch of properties, but no, I never signed anything. Why are you asking me to sign something? And they wouldn't be necessarily lying to you.
Yeah.
Because not everybody in our industry is doing things the way they should. Now, you should want to do the things that you should do, and you should want to do them because you're in business. This isn't play game, you know. I'm gonna be your tour guide and I'm gonna, because that agent that's out there showing properties that doesn't have any written agreement, those buyers can go and do anything they want, anytime they want. You got no protection. Like, who wants to work that way? Are you good with this, Rolando?
Yes, my one question I think I had is when can the buyer slash seller just terminate the contract?
Well, okay, these contracts are not unilateral, so it requires both parties to agree. Now, you might have a buyer, for instance, that you've been working with for a while, and maybe they're just like very, very difficult people. They're not reasonable people. You're coming to find out that you're not going to be able to help them. And you'd prefer not to spend more time, but it still would require to get, and there is a standard form of termination of the buyer rep agreement. And that gets signed by the broker and it gets signed by the parties. But it's not unilateral. Somebody can't, and so you're working with somebody and all of a sudden they have a whim and they want to go work with somebody else. They just don't have the right to dump you or dump us unless we agree to release them. So same thing with the sellers. It requires all parties to agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, we're good.
Yes.
So make sure we probe appropriately. So we and you agree that the contract is going to go into effect from such and such a date and through and including such and such a date. I would say best case scenarios, if you're working with somebody you have a really good feel for, you know them, they're, previous relationship on some level, they've got a legitimate bona fide pre-qualification for assuming that they're going to finance. If they're not financing, they would want to be able to provide us proof of funds to close based on one account or 2 accounts or 10 accounts, right? But assuming they're giving us all the right signals, they've got the financial ability, at least initially, giving us indication that they have the financial ability. That person, maybe you want to sign them up to as much as a 6-month agreement. I wouldn't go beyond 6 months with a buyer. As I think what you don't want to plant is, because even the first time buyer that says, well, we're just getting in the game and we just want to start exploring the market and getting familiar. And sometime this year, we would like to maybe potentially buy. Even that buyer, I would not sign them up for more than 6 months, because that first time buyer, once they get in the game, their whole motivation will accelerate. But you don't want to, my opinion, you don't want to be giving people the impression that you're going to be available to them, well, every Saturday and Sunday for the next 52 weeks. We can start at 9 in the morning and finish at 5 in the afternoon. So I mean, you're business people, so right. Good. Now, but let's say it's that buyer that you're just meeting. You don't really know them, they don't know you. You're going to go out and show them 3 properties. So you're going to keep. You've decided mutually you're going to keep this initial agreement for the 3 properties you showed them, and you literally identify those 3 properties. When it comes time for the contract dates, you still want to put 2 to 3 weeks in for those 3 properties, because if they're going to potentially buy one of them, they're not necessarily going to buy it today or tomorrow. They're going to want to come back, take another look at the property and take their time. And you want to make sure that even if it's only 1 property, 2 properties, 3 properties, you don't make this for one day. Because you
So
make,
we sign this after we see the 3 properties and
no, you sign it before
we-
you take them out.
to see them. So we already have them in mind. We already picked those out.
Yeah, 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 that, right, that's not an unusual scenario, but, you know, it's case by case. Okay, we good? 2. We will cooperate with you upon request. We will give you financial and personal information about our purchase abilities and needs. You may share financial and other information about our purchase needs and abilities with other agents who offer real property to you. We will permit you to contact our lender as necessary to assist in the process of obtaining the mortgage and to verify that we have the ability to purchase the property. So in that section, just be aware of you can share their personal, their needs with other people. The extent of that is when they write an offer on a property, and if they're financing, you would provide the pre-qualification letter. That's the information. Anything else that buyer wants you to share, they need to give you permission. Otherwise, they're clients of ours and we would not be sharing that with them. Okay. Number 3, you will use reasonable efforts to locate real property and assist us in the purchase or exchange of the real property on the terms and conditions acceptable to us. So contract language, reasonable. Sometimes when contracts get a little muddy and murky and ugly, the people have different definitions of what reasonable is, you know, mine versus yours. All I say is if we're gonna sign somebody up to, in this case, a buyer rep contract, we're gonna give them 100%. Once we take them on, we got them. Until it's over, we got them. Number 4, we will be reasonably available to examine real property. So, you know, kind of buyer consultation time before you even sign them up to an agreement. Are we gonna work well together? Here's setting expectations, their availability. This is a partnership. We're gonna be working closely together, blah, 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 you know, it's, they need to be reasonably available at the same time. You are not available 24/7. Number 5, you may represent other buyers and tenants who are interested in the same real property. So yes, it's kind of like a yes and a no. Yes, you can. You could show if you had 5 clients, buyer clients, and they wanted to see, all of them wanted to see a same property, you have the right to show all 5 of them the property. Where you might get into a little sticky area is if you have more than one of them that wants to write an offer. Then if you're in that scenario, it's called John, right? Because you can't, I mean, realistically, you can't give 100% of your fiduciary responsibility to multiple parties. That defies what fiduciary is. You may disclose my identity to third parties. Again, that's when they write an offer and they submit that offer with their proof of funds or their pre-qualification letter, we are now identifying who they are. I mean, in case what's still happening fairly frequently is buyers, when they submit their offers, they submit it with love letters. And they're really trying to impress the sellers, who they are and their family, and they love the house. And they want to raise their kids just like the current owners raised their kids for the last 30 years. And, you know, they'll really put on the charm. And sometimes that can be effective with people, sometimes not. But, you know, it's the buyer that would be writing that love letter, not you on their behalf, right?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day, so she was telling me how she got her house, and that's through a love letter.
She did the love letter.
She wrote the love letter. She wasn't the highest bidder,
Yeah.
but because of her love letter, the seller actually said, I'm gonna pick these people, they're not the highest bidder, but if they wanna come up to the highest bid, I'm gonna give them that chance. And that's how she actually got her house.
Yeah.
She rose her
No, it's
like
not
up to the highest bid, but because of that love letter,
Yeah.
she was in the game.
I mean, it can work against people, it can work for people. Yeah. On the listing side, just be aware, there is a form that, and I didn't put it in your package, but there is a form where when we're at the time of taking the listing, we would introduce the form to the seller and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, how do you feel about receiving love letters? Do you want us to pass them on if we receive them or not? Because the National Association of Realtors is like done a 180, maybe twice now, about should we be recommending our sellers accept these things? Because then the whole thing has to do with the potential for discrimination lawsuits. And the thing is, you might, by saying yes, you might be potentially discriminating on the one hand, and then if you choose the other choice, you might be discriminating on, so it's like, it really is up to the seller. But we should, if we're doing our professional best, we should be introducing the concept and the idea to them right at the time we're taking the listing, so we have clear definition and direction from them. But they do work, Justin, they do work. Number 7, we will refer questions concerning the legal title to property, tax considerations, property condition and inspection, building code and zoning compliance, engineering, square footage and acreage in the uses or planned uses of neighboring properties to my attorney, my tax advisor, my building inspector, the appropriate government agency or other appropriate professionals. So number 7 is we are realtors. We are not any of these other people.
On the line.
So we gotta be very careful when we start spewing information and providing information to people that we're in our correct zone. Yeah. 8, we understand and agree that you may also be a seller's agent for the real property covered by this contract, because we are interested in the property listed with your firm. In that event, you would be a dual agent representing both us and the seller. You will promptly disclose all relevant information to us and give us any disclosure notices and consent agreements required by law for our review and signature, and discuss the appropriate course of action to take under the circumstances. So for right now, anyway, in Connecticut, we do practice dual agency, so we want to make sure that our sellers understand it's a possibility,
That we might want to invest in the same property they do.
No, it's not so much that we might want to invest, it's just that we're listing their property, and then through our marketing efforts, the buyer comes directly to us. Now we're representing a buyer and we're representing a seller, right? And so that the fiduciary relationship sort of is melted down a little bit, because you can't be advocating for one more than the other. And so there's a form that they sign agreeing to allow, because Keller Williams will be in dual agency, as a company. But you as an agent are going to be in dual agency if you are representing both parties. But there's this other kind of dual designated agency, which we practice, which is a 2-page form. And that's when you have 2 Keller Williams in our company, one has the buyer, one has the seller. You're listing, Jessica's buyer. So that would be the form that everybody would sign. And actually I also signed that form. But the dual designated allows you to keep your fiduciary advocacy relationship with your seller and you with your buyer. Although Keller Williams as a company is in a dual agency environment.
So if I was explaining this, I'll say there might be a case where somebody will come to me to represent them. But this is to let you know that I owe you the fiduciary right, and we may go into a dual agency and pretty much just let them know that's how it works.
Yeah, you probably practice the script a little bit better, but yeah. But it's, once you sign this listing, they are fiduciary, we're a client relationship. But we're letting them know that there's a possibility that this thing called dual agency could come into play. And that might be that the buyer either comes directly to me, or the buyer comes to our company and is introduced either through me or through one of our other agents. In that case, it would require us to agree to dual agency and the relationship of dual agency. And it's not a bad idea, in my opinion, when you're doing the listing stuff, give them copies of the blank dual and dual designated agency forms. Let them see. This may never come into play, because it would only come into play if Keller Williams is involved with both sides of your transaction, but it might come into play, right? We go with that?
Yeah.
Number 9, we have the right to advise a seller in writing that knowledge that a property was at any time suspected to have been the site of a homicide, other felony, or suicide is important to our decision to purchase the property. So again, this is a conversation you want to have upfront with your buyers at the time you sign them up to a buyer rep agreement. Because the impacted properties could be, well, they could be impacted, the buyer might have a negative reaction if they know somebody committed suicide in the house. Or they might have a negative reaction if they know somebody was murdered in the house, right? So again, don't skip number 9, have the conversations, and would any of those situations be disturbing to you and affect your ability to want to move forward and purchase? Because if they say, well, yes, it would, then it would be a case for the buyer to gather information from a seller. They would literally have to put it in writing, buyer to seller. Could you please advise me of any of these impact situations and whether your property is affected by them? The seller in writing would respond back to the buyer. Now, the seller isn't required to, but the times where it has been important to buyers and they do the legitimate right thing and put it in writing, typically you're gonna get a response back from the seller. Because if somebody committed suicide in a house, there's no requirement for a seller to complete their property condition disclosure. There's nowhere to address any of that. And even, quite frankly, it can extend to people have concerns about pedophilia in the neighborhood. It's like, well, that would be something you'd really have to research through the town. Because we're not gonna know, and again, that the seller is not gonna be required to provide that information. Number 10, we acknowledge that we may be recorded on audio and or video surveillance or otherwise transmitted or recorded means by electronic devices when we enter or visit the property in connection with this contract. We acknowledge that you may not be aware of the presence of any such devices in any real property that we may view. We consent to any such audio and or video surveillance, recording, or transmission in the initial. Now that was added, if you look at the bottom of the page, this buyer rep contract was last revised in December 23. This video surveillance, audio surveillance business has got to be more important. Because many people are doing it, and technology is such today that who knows who's doing it and who's not. And if your job is to go and view the house and you're looking to see it as a potential purchase, you're not looking under the couches and and there is also a requirement, although not every seller knows this, there is a requirement. If people are going to be surveilled while they're in the property, that needs to be disclosed to the buyer. Otherwise it's illegal and it could be considered eavesdropping and could be a criminal offense. But I mean, and because of this, what's changed for us is not so long ago, once upon a time, when we had buyers would go and show properties, we would be encouraging our buyers to be as yacky and talkative and effusive and, let it all out. Tell me how to think, and it's like, so that is assuming the seller wasn't walking around with it. But now it's like the advice is really to keep keep your thoughts close to the vest, and we'll talk after we leave the property. You just don't know. Number 11, buyer agrees to indemnify and hold broker, its agents, successors, and assigns harmless from all suits, claims, demands, or damages related to or arising from the seller's use of electronic, mechanical, or other devices to record audio, video, or both at the property. So I think it kind of covers the surveillance business there between 10 and 11. The amount or rate of real estate broker compensation is not fixed by law. It is set by each broker individually and may be negotiable between you and the broker. For the purpose or exchange of real property, your service fee is, so that's what we're gonna fill in a blank, what are we getting paid? Of the agreed upon purchase price or exchange value, so it could be on line one, it would be more like a percentage of some kind, 2%, 2.5%, 3%. Whereas line two might be a dollar amount. Typically, it's line one that gets addressed. We'll read through this and then we'll go back and just talk about the actual.
I was just about to ask a question regarding that. Has that been contentious now that, more people are becoming aware of the fact that it is negotiable?
It's always been negotiable. I mean,
Well,
this language has always been here.
I think I agree with you, but coming from someone who's not in the know, right? So you're going with someone, there's been the perception before I took this real estate course that it was usually at that fixed rate of 6%, right? And I know that you know more than I do regarding that, but a lot of people that are unaware of that were under that notion that that's what it was. But
Yeah.
now that more people are becoming savvy about it, has that become problematic?
Well, I'd say it's not so problematic if you know how to have the right conversations. And like the 6% that you mentioned, 6% was never related to a buyer contract. It was always related to a listing contract. Our fee is 6%, and we're going to offer the cooperating brokerage who brings the buyer 3% or 2.5%, all negotiable. Our fee is 5%, and we're going to offer them 2.5%. Now the conversation on the listing side is my fee to represent you, Keller Williams, is 2.5%. Now we have to discuss what, if any, how much do we want to offer the buyer broker? Yes, no, or maybe. And that's where I think the conversation is going forward a little different, because it's not so much talking about the total commission in entirety and then saying, based on this commission, we're going to offer the cooperating broker this. It's our fee is this, and how much, if any, do we want to offer the cooperating broker? But whether it's 5%, 6%, I mean, sort of the Rolando, this, quote unquote 6% thing, that's been, that's really never been a thing, but it's been a thing. It definitely is not a thing now. Because I mean, you see people, they're out there with their sellers, they're taking listings at 4%, they're taking them at 5%, they're taking them at 6%, they're taking them for flat fees, it's like, there's a lot of business decision stuff going on for people. It's like, you yourself as a business person, it's like, what am I willing to work for?
Mhm.
What makes sense? What makes sense for me and what makes sense for my brokerage? But the conversation now going forward, I think, with the buyers is it's going to be a little bit more painful. I mean, we're talking very seriously about creating our own documents. And I think these documents are probably going to change before we get to August 17th, but they are now what they are because nothing's changed yet. But I foresee where the buyers are going to have when we go to contract with the buyers, it's going to be, my fee is 2.5%. We're going to seek it from the seller, but we may not get it from the seller, in which case you would be on the hook for it. Yes, I agree to that. Or the seller's not offering compensation for the buyer brokers for this particular property. Do you want to see that property? Because if so, you would be on hook. Yes, I do. No, I don't. Or another choice would be the seller is not offering compensation. However, we would potentially have the right to build it into our offer that the seller does pay the realtor fee, my fee. Would you want to see those properties? So I think this is the way this is going to, way I see it right now anyway.
For the buyer contract.
Yeah, for the buyer contract. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit simpler in terms of choice A, choice B, choice C. And so we'll be able to talk intelligently with the buyer about choice A, choice B, choice C, what works for you.
Yeah.
Um. Once we fill in, let's just say, we filled in 2.5% on line 1 there. It says your service fee applies to any real property which is purchased or exchanged, whether or not such real property is listed for sale or a lease by owner or located by us or me. You agree to request all or any part of your service fee from the seller or the listing agents. We will pay all or any part of your service fee that is not paid by the seller or the listing agency if and when we enter into the contract for the purchase or exchange of real property during the term of this contract and all material conditions have been met or are subsequently met after the expiration of the term of this contract. Or B, we purchase or exchange the real property covered by the contract during the term of the contract. Or C, we are introduced to a property during the term of this contract and obtain title to it within, and we have to fill in a blank there. It used to, once upon a time, auto-populate for 180 days, 6 months. Now it's negotiable between the buyer and ourselves. But, so it says, if you do the fee, if we are introduced to a property during the term of the contract and obtain title to it within, let's say we got 180 days after the expiration of this contract, provided that we do not enter into a new exclusive agreement with another broker in that period. In other words, if they were to try to go directly to the seller, and I'm okay with 180 days, I'm okay 120 days, I'm okay with 90 days. But I wouldn't leave it blank or put NA in there, because it'd be the one time you do, it'd be the buyer that tries to
Pull some.
pull the shady one on you. Yeah, so as far as the fee, and the way this is ultimately gonna shake out, we'll see. But for right now, you know, you wanna be making sure you're getting paid, whether it's gonna come from the seller in the transaction, or it's gonna come from your buyer. So, again, we're in a business. All right. We good?
So,
13. We will pay you a non-refundable retainer fee of, which is 99.9% of the time gonna just be NA, non-applicable. Because we don't get into non-refundable retainer fees. I mean, there could be a circumstance where that might apply, but then that would really be have a conversation with me and let's talk about it, because chances are it's not gonna apply. And the other is, the other part of that is an hourly fee, and we don't really, we don't get into collecting hourly fees. So you're looking at NA, and NA. 14 applies and filled in, so there could be some other specific conditions to the agreement, moving forward, and if so, we have a little bit of space there to address whatever the concern might be or the agreement, the expansion of the agreement. 15, we've received a copy of the contract, which, by the way, validates contracts. So if you're doing things electronically, great, because everybody's gonna automatically, have their record. But if you're meeting them at the restaurant and you're doing it paper and, just make sure when you get to a location where you can email them their document, you do so.
then it's in effect.
Hmm?
Then it's in effect, which everybody
Yeah.
has it. Well, paper.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, missing the copy part could be, well, it would not be a valid contract. So at the bottom of page 1, we're gonna get their initials and date. And we're gonna go to page 2. You may enforce this contract against us, against our heirs, administrators, executors, and assigns. It's identical language to the listing contract as well, standard contract language. 17, we agree to pay any costs and attorney fees which you may incur to collect any monies due you under this contract. And then 18, this contract may be modified, waived, or discharged only by a written agreement between the parties. And that's where it addresses the issue of unilateral. It's not unilateral. If you were gonna cross out something, let's say number 17. They're gonna agree to pay any cost, attorney's fees, which we may incur to collect any monies due under contract. The likelihood of us getting involved with that kind of legal morass is very, very, very small. So I mean, so if you had somebody say, 17, I'm like, I can't move forward. If you cross out one line item, and everybody initials outside of it, that removes that one line item as far as the contract goes, and everything else is enforceable.
Mhm.
No, you don't want to be playing around with that kind of thing when it comes to the fee stuff. Because you want to get paid. Execution by electronic methods. So, yeah, we want to make sure that they're in agreement with us to allow us to do electronic stuff with them, whether it's DocuSign, DocLoop, whether it's MLS transaction desk, whether it's email, PDF. But if they don't, just don't ignore that, because if they don't give us permission, what it's really saying is every time we need some document signed, we have to go chase them down and find them, or they have to find us, which is not a good use of your time. And then they would be signing it and dating and their address, and brokerage firm Keller Williams Legacy Partners. You are the authorized rep. You would be dating it, and our address, and you can use, this is the legal entity address, 29 South Main Street, West Hartford, but you could use any of our office locations. It would be sufficient. So I don't know how I just skipped over and under 18. So the contract is subject to the Connecticut general statutes prohibiting discrimination in commercial and residential real estate transactions. And it is unlawful for, I mean, basically, it is unlawful for unless somebody is not financially qualified, there's no aspect of discrimination that's lawful. If they can't afford it, then okay.
Just can't afford it.
Yeah, there's nothing else that would qualify. And then they have read notice the section, so we'd get their initials there. And then right underneath that, it does say the real estate broker may be entitled to certain lien rights pursuant to subsection D and so there are times when we might have the right to sue for commissions that are due us. Doesn't happen too often, but there is a provision in the state statutes that gives us the right to pursue. So, get their signatures, dates. We have a fully executed, as soon as they have a copy, buyer representation agreement. Now, we ask our buyers, when we sign up our buyers to the buyer rep agreement, we also ask each of our buyers to sign off on this foundation advisory for buyers. As we know, in the state of Connecticut, primarily east of the river, but in the state of Connecticut, there are issues with crumbling foundations. It's been going on for a while now, and it can be torturous and very expensive to remedy for the poor homeowner that's dealing with that kind of issue. So we want our buyers, regardless of where they might buy, we want them educated as to what's going on out there. So we ask them to sign this, and for instance, if you sign a buyer rep agreement and you don't provide this document, we'll chase you down for it. That's our compliance people will send you a notice once or twice, and then they'll call me and I got the hammer. All right, so we got foundation advisory. So I put this real estate prospective parties disclosure notice. This is a document, whether before you enter into a buyer rep agreement or before you enter into a seller listing agreement. It's just a document that explains agency, not a bad document to provide people.
Mhm.
You know, the more we provide, the more we educate. And the reality of this until people are clients, they shouldn't be disclosing really important personal financial information with us.
Mhm.
And we really shouldn't be asking for it. So, but this document, this just adds a little bit of clarity as to how we all operate out there. We're not requiring that you use it, but I think best business practices, not a bad idea. So we good with the buyer?
Is this the same one as if we're doing a listing?
Nope, that's what we're talking about right now. Listing. Yeah, totally different.
And they don't have representation, nah,
Oh, you're talking about this form?
yeah.
Yeah, well, you would give it to a seller, you give it to a buyer, before you would enter into a contract with either. The type of agency relationship that applies to both buyers and sellers. We good to go to, we good for listings? All right. So, we owners, whoever they are, give you brokerage firm, Keller Williams Legacy Partners. Listing agreement for their property located at, whatever the address of the property is that's being sold. And what price are we gonna be listing it at? So, as far as the owners go, always double check the assessor's card for the town to make sure the people that you're sitting in front of or supposedly going to be sitting in front of are the actual owners. And you know, for instance, you might be sitting with a husband and wife, but Uncle George out on the West Coast has part ownership of the house. Well, if he's mentioned as a part owner, then to legitimize the listing, you need all three signatures. So we just need to make sure that we're talking to the right people and all of the right people. Parties agree, a contract will go into effect on such and such a date and will remain effective through such and such a date. You know, and I would say in our market, you could use 6 months as a benchmark. The reality of listings in our current environment, you know, unless you're completely off the wall with your listing price, things are gonna sell quickly. So you could take, you know, 6 month listing, a 5 month listing, a 4 month listing, even a 3 month listing. You got flexibility there, you know, make a business decision. The longer the listing would be based on the fact that we know it's really overpriced, but our client wants to quote unquote test the market, and we're gonna be patient and walk them through 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 price reductions, and that takes time. So,
And for each price reduction, would they re-sign one of?
no, there's a standard boilerplate form.
Okay.
It's an amendment to the exclusive right to list. And, you know, if you're changing a price, if you're changing the listing dates, if you're, you know, changing a whole bunch of things, you just go to use that one boilerplate form. But to that point, you don't change any terms and conditions without signatures authorizing. We will refer all inquiries or offers concerning the listed property to you. Which would include if we have the listing or marketing and they come across somebody who might be their neighbor or whatever, who's interested in maybe buying it. Their obligation would be to introduce that potential buyer to us and we would handle that transaction. You may place a for sale sign on the listed property. Typically, yes, but sometimes you need conversation there. We would encourage it. Next to the internet, the activity that will be drawn to a property is there's a lot of sign activity. So, but you might have a seller who they're an elderly couple and they live at the end of a cul-de-sac and they have health issues and they, you know, there are going to be some occasions where people just don't want to sign. You don't want to walk away from the listing, but at the time you're taking the listing, you want to encourage the sign. and you have to be careful if it's a condo complex. Many of the condo complexes, as a matter of fact, just about all of them won't allow signs. So if you're not going to put a sign up at the property, then you draw a line through that one line item and everybody initials outside of it. Number 4, same thing, but lockboxes. You may install an electronic lockbox and or mechanical combination lockbox on the listed property. We understand that members of associations of realtors in this region and other authorized persons will have access to this lockbox. And so for us, we don't put any directives or restrictions on whether you use combo boxes or you use the E-key super box.
Is there a benefit for the E-key one?
Well, the E-key is the most secure because to access the property, the key is in the box on the door, and you're either gonna blow up the box, right? Or you're gonna need to access it through your key system, which records the fact that you're the one doing it. So if a listing agent needs to look at access and who's shown the property, that's, everything's recorded. That's not necessarily so secure with a combo box. Example of, it's a total violation, but has it happened where agents, maybe knowing somebody's not home or it's a vacant property, will give the combo codes out to their respective clients and let them go look at the properties without them.
Yeah.
And it's like a total violation.
Yeah.
But has that happened?
Do you think it's on our benefits to just go ahead and get the electric one over?
Yeah,
Like that list knowledge of who's in there could like pretty much be.
yeah, but when you're out in the marketplace right now, it's probably 50-50. If you're showing property, you know, like 50% of them will probably be combos and 50% of them will be EQ, but your business decision. Now, right now, and as of last week, the Greater Hartford Association of Realtors was still advertising a special on the super boxes at $55 each. Previously, they were like 110. So if you're thinking of getting some E-keys, some boxes, might not be a bad time to go get a couple. Now, and you might also have a case where you got that elderly couple, sickly, they're home all the time, or they've got vicious dogs that they need to remove from the property when showings are happening, so they don't want any lockbox on the door. If they're not gonna allow for a lockbox, then you cross out that line item and just initial it. Otherwise, we encourage, because if you got the lockbox on the door, kind of lends itself to getting the maximum exposure possible to the property.
One more time.
Having a box on a property is going to provide more opportunity for showings versus some cases, listing agent has to be present for showings. Well, if I'm the listing agent and I'm busy doing other things and you want to show the property at 2 o'clock this afternoon and I can't accommodate you.
Yeah.
And then we have to reschedule, and when can we reschedule? And you know, it's like, it could be totally cumbersome. Number 5, you will use reasonable efforts to sell the listed property. So the word reasonable again. But as I said, with the buyer contracts, with our listing contracts, once we take them on, 100%, we're in. We're in. 6, subject to any applicable multiple listing service rules, you will submit the listed property to the applicable multiple listing service or services. We will provide accurate information about the listed property for such submission. We understand information about the listed property, including the property address submitted to the service, may be posted on the internet, maybe via websites as you may determine. You will submit photographs of the exterior and may submit photographs of the interior of the listed property. We recognize and understand that you permit other real estate licensees who are not affiliated with you to advertise your listings on their websites and in brochures and other media. We hereby consent that you may permit such licensees to advertise the listed property on their websites and in brochures and other media. So, you know, I mean, today's world, pretty much everybody is comfortable with and acclimated to the internet and the vast exposure. very seldom are you gonna get any kind of pushback here, but it's the opportunity to have that conversation. For some reason, somebody may object to some part of it, but, it's also here, it's a good opportunity to talk about when the photographer comes out, that, is there anything that you don't want photo? Sometimes people have, particular personal things that they would rather not have splashed out on the internet. 7, we understand that you are not an insurer against theft, loss, or damage to the listed property. We understand the advisability of verifying the existence of or obtaining appropriate insurance through our insurance broker, and that you are not responsible for theft, loss, or damage to the listed property. For us there, the important part of the conversation is just to make them, assure them that as we go live with the listing and showings are taking place in the property, that they absolutely need to just be as safe as possible and remove things from their desktops and their bureaus, like wads of cash and diamond rings, and it's just to take just normal good precautions. But I would make sure you take the time to have the conversation, because some people are oblivious, don't want to invite any trouble. In bold, the amount of rate of real estate brokerage compensation is not fixed by law. It is set by each broker individually and may be negotiable between you and the broker. And it says 8, we will pay you a service fee of dollar amount or percentage of the agreed upon sale price if and when. So we'll read through it and then come back to it. We enter into a contract for the sale of the listed property, and all material conditions have been met or are subsequently met after the expiration of the term of this contract. Or B, during the term of the contract, we, you, or anyone else finds a buyer ready, willing, and able to buy the listed property for no less than the listed price or any other terms acceptable to us. Or C, we will pay you the agreed upon commission in paragraph 8 if within, there's that 90 days, 120 days, 180 days. If within so many days after this contract terminates, we shall sell the listed property to anyone who saw it through you or any cooperating broker before the contract terminated, provided that we do not enter into a new exclusive listing agreement in that period. Once they sign up with a new broker, it's off. We're out. So going to the fee itself, to Rolando's question earlier about the 6% thing. So wasn't that long ago, it was a normal conversation to talk about the full commission, and then we're going to share some percentage of that full commission with the cooperating broker. Now the conversation going forward, and we are having it now, even though things haven't officially changed until August 17th because of the settlement. But the conversations we're having now they've changed in anticipation. So the conversation might be my fee to represent you, Mr. Seller, Colin Williams, represent you is 3%. Now we need to talk about what, if any, compensation we feel is appropriate to offer the buyer brokerage. And
really quickly, John. So I know I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know you had mentioned before that the possibility of them not offering. Can you just go over that one more time? Let's say they only wanted to offer 1%.
yeah,
What does that mean for us, the realtor who's representing the buyer, and what's that look like?
well, as a listing agent at the moment, right? They're going to have the right to choose whether they want to offer something that we would consider and recommend as adequate compensation, good compensation for that buyer broker representation. The advantage of that is the buyer broker coming with their buyer to the property, they're under contract. That is a professional realtor who's going to be representing the interests of the buyer. And it is so imperative on transactions to have professional people working with professional people to get to the finish line. But they may say, you may have the best conversation in the world, And you may give all the great reasons why it would be in their best interest to offer that cooperating broker 2.5%. And the point going forward now is they're gonna have a choice to say, yes, I agree with you, and I think that makes total sense. Because I'm gonna maximize my exposure, which is probably gonna get me the best price in terms possible. And it's worth me offering that compensation to draw the maximum amount of potential buyers to my property. Or they may say, no, I'm not really interested. I'll pay your fee. I'll pay you your 3%, or I'll pay you your 2.5%, but I don't want to offer any compensation, or I want to offer 1%, or I want to offer 1.5, or I want to offer 2. They're gonna now have a choice, Wanda. And the thing, think about it, they have a choice and they say 1%. Well, you're gonna list the property, we're gonna get paid on the listing side. Now it's gonna get entered, well, when we get to August 17th, we won't even be able to enter that specific offering of compensation, even though it's only 1%. It's gonna have to be provided, the information will have to be provided in another format, which stay tuned with that, that'll be coming.
It's crazy.
Oh, it is. It's so unnecessary. It's so crazy, but here we are.
Yeah,
And
that
the
is,
whole idea of this is, consumer choice and transparency, and all it really is going to do is make things more complicated for the consumer.
exactly,
Yeah.
because you want transparency.
Yeah.
Let me know if I wanna go show your property or not.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if it's 1%, I may not be up to show it.
Right.
But I guess my confusion is, well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about, I don't want to hold everybody up, but I guess my confusion is, I know we're talking about the seller side, but on the buyer side,
Oh,
I know that I'm representing the buyer,
Mhm.
and I know in the background that I'm, let's hypothetically say, going to get 0.5%. What does that mean for me as the agent?
Yeah, you're getting 0.5%.
half of 1%.
No, I recognize that, but like the motivation for me as the agent is to be like I get this is a beautiful home, but this is really crappy for us with all the time, devotion, and dedication. If that's all we're getting out of the deal.
Well, here's the thing, if you sign that, going back to the buyer contract for a moment, if the fee that we're accepting to represent the buyer is 2.5%, and some seller is not going to offer that, and the buyer is not willing to pay our fee, then we have to go find another property. Or
That's a really tough conversation to have if their heart is set on that property.
well, although most of the time, when you sign the contract, you're gonna be doing it before a property has been identified. So right now, we don't know. And there's a good chance before August that we may very well have our own buyer rep contract forms, which it's gonna give the buyer option A, option B, option C, check a box, which is gonna work for you. And that's gonna be your opportunity to talk about all the ramifications and the possibilities of what exists out there and how do they want to proceed with us. And if they basically say, look, I'm not interested in having to pay the fee. We don't work for free, so it's gonna come from somewhere. It's either gonna come from our buyer, it's gonna come from the seller, or we keep looking for property. Or, it's like, they can have a choice, no compensation being offered, but they like the property, they wanna see it anyway, they love it. And they write their offer, and it's subject to the seller paying the realtor fee, 2.5%. On behalf of a contingency, their contingency to purchase. Seller can say yes, no, or maybe. But that's where on the seller side, the exposure is it's gonna be somewhat impactful, right? Not if the buyer knows that they're gonna be paying the fee, there's only a certain percentage of buyers that are gonna be cool with that, right? And many of them not. And so many of them nots are not gonna see the property. And it's gonna limit the exposure for the seller. So is that working in the best interest of the seller? Not really, no, probably not, but again, they're gonna have choice now. And we're gonna have to, get into the deep of the conversations so that they fully understand and the buyers fully understand. And then we move forward, but at least we'll have clarity.
Thank you.
Was that helpful? All right. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
So I would say number 8, 3%, our fee is gonna be, well. If we're talking about our fee, let's say we're talking about our fee being 3%. But then we're gonna go to number 9. It says, we authorize you to pay a portion of any service fee payable to us equal to blank or blank dollar amount or percentage of the agreed upon sale price to the buyer's brokers. And then right underneath that, it says, we acknowledge that you have explained cooperative compensation to us and that we understand that the buyer brokers owe undivided fiduciary duties to the buyers, not to us, all sellers initial. So that's where what our fee is, and then what are we going to be paying, if any, to the buyer brokers for compensation? 2.5%, great. I think that's a great idea. I think it's, it's a compensation that will attract buyers and buyers agents. So then we would fill, in that case, we would fill this in as a 5.5% commission. Or if we're gonna get 2.5 on the listing side and we're gonna offer, they may say 2%. Then it's a 4.5% listing, right? Clear as mud.
Yeah.
All right. We good for the moment? All right, so we go to number 10. We understand and agree that you may also be a buyer's agent for the listed property. In that event, you would become a dual agent representing both us and the buyer. As a dual agent, you would owe us and the buyer a duty of fairness and honesty. Because you would not represent us exclusively, we cannot expect to have your undivided loyalty. As a dual agent, you may not reveal any confidential information which would provide a negotiating advantage to either party except as authorized by either party or required by law. If a dual agency arises, you will promptly disclose all relevant information to us and give us any disclosure notices and consent agreements required by law for our review and signature. So again, dual agency. Conversation, we're gonna have the conversation. We good? 11, you will seek offers for the listed property until such time as we shall sign a purchase and sale agreement with a buyer. Thereafter, you will present to us any additional offers that may be received. In a multiple offer situation, we may authorize you to disclose to a buyer who has submitted an offer and or to any such buyer's broker that the fact that we have received other offers for the listed property. Now, number 11 doesn't say that they do give us permission, they may give us permission. So when you get into that multiple offer conversation, what we can say to other brokers is going to be dependent on our conversation with our seller and what our seller wants us to convey. And if they want us to convey that they have 10 offers, great. If they don't want us to convey at this point, an example where they might not want us to convey, it'd be like, we have an offer, we're negotiating an offer, agent calls up the listing agent and says, hey, any offers? So did we have a conversation with our seller? Maybe we didn't have a conversation with the seller. So all we could say to that agent is not at liberty to share that with you at the moment. And I'll get back to you sometime, whatever. Or you've already had the conversation with the seller and the seller says, yeah, if you get that phone call, let them know that let them know that we're in, we're talking to offers, we're already negotiating. But that should come directly as an authorization from the client, not from us, right? Okay. 12, we have received a copy of the contract, so that's important again. 13, you may enforce contract against us, our heirs, administrators, executors, and assigns. So same contractual language as with the buyer rep agreement. 14, we agree to pay any costs and attorney fees which you may incur to collect any monies due to you under the contract. Again, same as the buyer representation agreement. Other terms, so we have some space here to address any kind of specific conditions of our listing contract that the language in the contract itself doesn't cover. 16, we understand that you, as my agent and my buyer's agent, have a legal obligation to disclose any material information that you know about the listed property. So if there are known deficiencies and we're aware of them, whether the seller wants to give us permission or not to share them with an interested buyer, we would be obligated to share them, right? We don't have a choice. We represent to you that the listed property does or does not have video surveillance and or recording devices, systems, equipment on the premises. 18, we represent to you that the listed property does or does not have audio surveillance and or recording device systems or equipment on the premise. So with the Greater Hartford Association of Realtors listing agreement, the seller has to address one or the other, yes or no. And if they say yes, then we have to make sure we're educating them that they need to make sure that any buyer entering the property is going to be aware of the surveillance prior to their entering the property. Part of why you can't be assured of this issue is, as of right now, the only listing contract that I know that has this language is Greater Hartford. I don't know, unless a couple of them have just most recently added to this language to their documents, they don't even address it, which again, if you're not addressing it in the listing agreement itself, is the seller even aware of the problems of surveilling unlawfully, or the listing agent not even being aware that it is unlawful. 19. Audio recording another individual without advance consent may be a crime. Video recording in an area of the property where there is a reasonable expectation of privacy may be a crime. Seller agrees to identify and hold broker, its agents, successors, and assigns harmless from all suits, claims, demands, or damages related to or arising from the seller's use of electronic, mechanical, or other devices to record audio, video, or both at the property. So hopefully get a little bit of assurance there that somehow we're not going to get thrown under the bus.
Right.
So we get the owner's initials and date, broker's authorized representative initial, that'd be you. And we would move on to number 2, property address, page 2 of 2. Statements required by law. The real estate broker may be entitled to certain lien rights, same as the buyer contract, subsection, pursuant to subsection D and X in subsection D through Q of section 20-32 through 25A of the Connecticut General Statutes. The agreement is subject to the Connecticut General Statutes prohibiting discrimination in commercial and residential real estate transactions. Same language. It's unlawful to discriminate under any circumstances except for the financial ability for somebody to purchase. Sellers are going to initial there, that they've read it. Other statements. We understand that we must give prospective buyers a fully completed residential property condition disclosure report. We must give the report to the buyers before they execute a written offer to buy the listed property. Otherwise, we must credit the buyer $500 at closing. So very important that when we're getting listings, that we're ensuring that our seller clients are completing the condition report, so that when we go live with the listing, we're uploading the condition report with it, not after the fact. We don't want our sellers being subject to $500 fines unnecessarily. You have given us a blank residential property condition disclosure report. So we would be obviously providing them that. We understand that certain types of work, which may have been performed at the listed property, may have required a building permit. If such building permit was required, but was not obtained, we understand that unpermitted work in open permits may result in significant delays and or additional expense during the real estate transaction. Now, this language was added in maybe not this latest one, but it might have been updated 2023 one. Permits have gotten to be big issue stuff, big issue. Seems like at least a couple, several times a week, I'm talking to one of our people about some transaction they're involved with where permits are an issue. It's like people are not, listing agents aren't having the right conversation with their sellers. Buyers agents aren't necessarily addressing issues with their buyers. And then all of a sudden, I mean, we have one right now, which is this is the first time this has happened. So we have the listing, it's in Newington. The buyer's buying it. The sellers have been living in this house for 30 some odd years. Buyers under contract, all inspections done. The appraisal's been done. All this is going on. Everything's going smooth. The sellers in the meantime, while this is going on, just received last week a notice from the town of Newington. And the notice is identifying the fact that there were not permits taken 30 years ago. The work was done 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, here's what's going on with the towns. They're looking for revenue.
Mhm.
And when you got a property that's on MLS and it's being advertised and marketed, you can research it and you can, oh, there's nothing on our records that says this lower level finished record, right? And so all of a sudden you got this, you don't have the buyer who's concerned, you don't have the lender who's concerned, you got the town who's jumping in like, what the hell?
Their money.
Yeah, and that's it, it's a money grab for sure. Alrighty, so permits. Language, information about federal lead laws, always in its own box, federal lead laws. So all these 3 paragraphs support. Buyer, if the property is built before 1978, the buyer has the right to have a lead risk assessment done within 10 days of the execution of the agreement. They don't have to have it done, most people don't, but they have the right. And you see at the very bottom here that the sellers are initialing that they've read this. And so the question will come up to me as well, my seller's house is newer than 1978, so do they even need to initial this box? And I would suggest, yes, they do, it's part of the contract. And yes, because it's a newer house, it won't apply, but it's part of the contract. So it's just suggesting they've read it. On the purchase and sale agreement, there's a section for lead where the buyer can actually acknowledge that they're waiving it. They're not going to have it, but they don't have to waive it. So we understand that potential serious health risks, including cancer, brain damage, and acute illnesses such as eye, nose, and throat irritation, are associated with lead substances, asbestos, radon, and other environmentally hazardous conditions. Therefore, we must tell prospective buyers if we know that these conditions exist in the listed property. If we fail to disclose known material information about the listed property, including the presence of environmentally hazardous conditions, we may be violating federal and or Connecticut law. This can result in a rescission of any purchase agreement between us and a prospective buyer. And 2, an award of damages against us as the seller or any person responsible for disclosing the information. Or 3, statutory damages under federal laws on lead-based substances. This is in addition to any requirement to credit a buyer 500 buckaroos at the closing if we have not given the buyer a residential property disclosure report. And then we have some go-to places. Further information about environmentally hazardous conditions can be obtained from the Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection and the site, the Connecticut Department of Public Health and the site, and the US Environmental Protection Agency and the site. So if they want to get more educated, there are places for them to go. Execution by electronic methods, same language as with the buyer rep contract. We want to make sure that our sellers are giving us permission to communicate with them electronically. Again, loop, DocuSign, transaction disc, email, PDF, whatever the case may be. We're gonna get their names, their signatures and street address. Brokerage firm, Keller Williams Legacy Partners, you are the authorized rep. And street address and city and town and state. And now we would have an executed exclusive right to listing agreement,
And
which
clubs.
is, pardon?
And clubs.
I'm sorry, what?
I said and clubs.
Oh, hand claps, yeah, they're, you know, listings are the gold standard, gang, you know, you got listings, you got money in your pocket.
Mhm.
Not so easy with buyers right now, because you might have to write multiple offers on multiple properties before you get one accepted, but, listings are good.
Yeah.
I'd say buyers are good, but if you have listings, by the way, you will attract buyers, so. So two other documents that we have our sellers sign, as well as the listing agreement, is this fair housing notice. Now, they initialed on the second page of the listing agreement about the discrimination, fair housing stuff, but this is a required. We've been requiring it for a while. The state is now requiring it, that for us to be in compliance with our files, that each seller and or landlord needs to read this and sign it. And so we need it as documents with our compliance with our listing agreements. And then the other document, which is it's a KW document that we ask all of our sellers and or landlords to sign, is a vacant property advisory. And the importance of this is somebody who's marketing a property for sale, and whatever the circumstances, there's a sort of extended period of time where that property is vacant. That people need to be in touch with their insurance company, because if they fail to do so, and sort of the benchmark might be over something vacant over 30 days. Oh, and by the way, now we have some kind of winter pipes burst catastrophe. Seller makes a claim, insurance company denies. And we've had two of these instances over the last 5-6 years. One of them was just last year, and the seller, it was our seller, he signed this thing, he read it. He got his property under contract, he moved to a different part of the country. And God bless him, I still to this day don't know what he was thinking or how he was thinking, but he himself called the utility company to have the utility shut off to save money. Burst pipes, flood, couple hundred. It was, well, it was, I don't know, maybe $150,000 worth of damage.
Oh, God.
Yeah, never, and they denied his claim. And he had, bye Joanne. He had the absolute perfect buyer. It was a nonprofit that was buying a property for some kind of home, you know, group home. But they were like rock solid organization. And the deal went south. They waited and waited and waited to see if the insurance claim would kick in. Never happened.
Oh, God.
So we decided years ago, after the first episode, that we wanted to make sure that our sellers were educated. And our landlords, don't leave your property vacant without insurance protection. And usually, not every insurance company will insure. And the kind of insurance that somebody might have to have is the insurance that the flippers of the world, when they buy properties and then they renovate them, remodel them. So they typically take out policies for 6 months, and it's fairly expensive. It's not cheap, but they're protected. You know, would you rather spend $2,000 or would you rather have to come up with $150,000 on your own? So Anyway, we ask our sellers and landlords to acknowledge the vacant property advisory that we provide them. And then we have the same document applies, real estate prospective parties disclosure notice that applies to future sellers and it applies to, future, tenants, landlords, buyers and sellers. And having said all that, you have now one buyer rep agreement signed and you have one listing agreement signed. So thoughts, questions,
I was talking to Tiffany about, like comparing and, doing my, road plan and stuff. She said it's okay to just send you, I don't say fake ones, but like fake ones just to make sure we got everything clean.
yeah, as a matter of fact, you bring that up. When I first started, you know, a couple centuries ago, we were just getting into automobiles back then.
Damn.
We're just getting out of the horse and buggy thing and getting into automobiles. But anyway, I didn't have the extensive kind of a training that goes on today in this world with us. I had two singular appointments with the broker of the company, maybe an hour each. And it was like, go get him, John. Yeah. But that's exactly what I used to do, like with the purchase and sale agreements. I would write up fake ones. You know, all kinds of different financing and I just fill in the blanks and I just wanted to make sure that I was comfortable with those documents. So that first buyer I sat down with in writing an offer, that I was gonna be doing it with confidence. And I was, but I'll tell you, the first time I sat down with a buyer, I remember distinctly, we were outside of the office and it was a nice day and there was a picnic table, and we were sitting on the picnic table. And I swear to God, I was, even though I was prepared and confident, I was so nervous, I felt I was lifting the table off the ground. So. But they never had an inkling that you know, but it was like, you know, if you play sports and you're at the, you know, just before the big game, you know, you're all. And it was kind of the same thing with the listing documents, and I knew those documents cold and, you know, I felt. Was I gonna go to that first seller's house and be perfect? No, probably not, but I was gonna go to that first seller's house, I was gonna prepare the best I can, and I was gonna get the listing hopefully, but if nothing else, totally learn from the experience. So every time is a building block, it's another opportunity to talk with people and have good real estate conversation.
I see that on our paper, one of the things that we should do is shadow a listing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, I don't know if, does Tiffany have any recommendations of people to shadow?
No. they don't
Okay,
get
definitely.
involved.
I know everybody's saying so far with all the classes, go to the Facebook groups and just ask.
Well, yeah, that's true too, with the Facebook group, you could say, hey, look, see what you get for response, love to shadow a listing appointment, love to shadow showing appointment.
Just if anybody's interested, I know that Jenny Adamo is going to be doing an open house this Saturday in Manchester. I'm going to be joining her just so that I can see how she runs an open house.
Yeah.
I can let her know if you're interested. Just to stop by and check it out. She's very, very forthcoming and very, you know, friendly and knowledgeable. So if you're interested, I'm just throwing that out there.
You know what time on Saturday?
I believe it's, let me just double check. Let me look at what she posted.
We're talking about Jenny Mascaro?
No, Adamo. Jen Daisy. I'm sorry. She goes like Daisy, but she's Jen.
Yeah,
Adamo.
Jenny Daisy.
Yeah.
I was gonna
So
say,
it's June 22nd, 11 to 1, and it is located at 335 Charter Oak Street in Manchester, Connecticut. So I'm pretty much going to shadow her, how she runs that.
We go. Sounds good.
yeah,
I might see you over there. Actually, before you leave, can I get your number?
Absolutely. 860-377-5572.
860-377-5572.
Correct.
Ronaldo. I'm gonna send you a text with my name.
No problem. Thank you.
I got you. We're live. Sorry. Here we go. And then question for you, John.
Mhm.
You said you started way back in the day. How'd you get to where you are now? Like to be the broker, this is your whole.
Well, like, of course, like all of us, I started in sales and in Farmington. The company I worked with back then, independent company, and there are a lot more of the smaller independent companies back then.
Mhm.
You know, the bigger companies, they weren't as abundant.
Yeah.
It's a shift in the way real estate goes versus the way it used to go. But as an independent company, it was a very successful organization, had 3, 4 offices. Ultimately, before Oren sold the company, it got up to like 7 offices, which back then was a pretty good sized
Yeah.
company, right? But they were all local. But so I started out in Farmington. And after being in the biz for several years, there was an opportunity. We had a relocation director, and we were one of the very few companies that actually had somebody who was a relocation director. Anyway, she came across in Torrington, the Torrington company. They were closing a plant down in Indiana, and they were relocating like large number of families up into the Torrington, greater Torrington area. And we did a pitch with the Torrington company about handling the relocation for these families.
Mhm.
Because actually all the companies out in Torrington were real small, mom and pop things, 2 or 3 people. So they liked what we had to say. We didn't have any presence up there. We were in Farmington. So as part of getting the contract to work with these families coming from Indiana, Oren agreed to go out and we would open an office up here. And he asked me to go do that.
Mhm.
So that got me moving and shaking out of the sales career part of my life into the management end of real estate.
Mhm.
And we were very successful out there. And I worked out there for several years, built that office up very nicely. And then they asked me to come back into Avon,
Mhm.
which we had another office in Avon. So I worked that for quite some time. And then from there, it was the real estate, people selling businesses, somebody else buying, and they're selling. So I worked with the company originally, it was Compass Realty, and I worked, and that's where I literally grew up.
Mhm.
But then from there, it went to what was Prudential, which is now Berkshire Hathaway.
Mhm.
Because Berkshire, basically Prudential ended up buying Orange Company, Compass. So I became chattel. Like, you buy a real estate company, that's what you're buying people,
Yeah.
So worked with that organization. And then the DeWolf organization, which was not in Connecticut till the mid-90s. They were in New England, and they were the largest real estate organization in New England, privately owned. They came into Connecticut, and I got approached to go work with them. which I was really happy with the opportunity, because I wasn't really happy with Prudential. I just didn't like the way they operated. It was so totally bureaucratic and you never knew, I mean, with that, you just never knew when you were getting the truth, and
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, it just wasn't the perfect fit. So I worked with DeWolf, and then DeWolf ultimately sold to Coldwell Banker, and worked with Coldwell Banker, and then Keller Williams came into town. It was like, so 2005. So, a grassroots organization in Connecticut, we didn't, you know, when DeWolf came into Connecticut, they bought, as part of them coming into Connecticut, they literally bought a couple brokerages. So there was a presence immediately. With us, Keller Williams in Connecticut, there was no presence. Keller Williams was around for sure. It had been since 1983. And it actually had gotten into Connecticut, but not Connecticut, or it got into New England, but not Connecticut. But the original ownership group, a couple guys, they were interested in kind of expanding the real estate business and wanted to talk about some various franchises. We made a lot of calls and talked to a lot of franchises, and they sort of landed on this thing called Keller Williams, and it was very interesting back then, and not much different today, is to get awarded a franchise with Keller Williams. You not only needed to be financially sound, but you had to have enough productive agents willing to come and actually working with you to provide a guarantee that profit share would be available and would be a realization from the day you opened your doors. So at that time, we had to get about 40 people to commit to us, who were producing people. And so we moved it to this space I started officially working in December of 2005. Mike and Kurt, original two owners, you know, they really started hammering away in midsummer. And that's actually when they approached me. And they took some space in Avon, bigger space in December. I started in December. No, they took it in November. I started in December, and then we started just recruiting and building, and the franchise was officially awarded in April of 2006. And kind of the rest is.
I put in work.
It's history. Pardon?
Yeah, so you guys put in work.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing.
So how'd you guys get affected once 2008 hit?
Well, we got hit. This is a recessionary market, and quite frankly, we were only 2 years old, right?
Yeah.
So there were some really, really tough times, but just kept at it, didn't give up, just kept at it.
Consistency.
And yeah, then we opened up in West Hartford before we officially closed Avon. When the lease came up in Avon, we ended up just not renewing that lease. It was a huge space, and we didn't need that huge space. It served a purpose while it was there. Well, yeah, and it's been a pretty fascinating ride, and it was during because I was the original team leader for the Keller Williams franchise. So like what Heidi is the team leader, I was that team leader person, and my primary focus and job was to try to grow the company. Just can't remember what year it was, but in shifting positions and whatnots, at that time, Mike Ladden approached me and said, "Look, we need a broker role. We want you to do that." And so that started that whole thing. And here I am, you know.
Respect.
So
That's good.
been a good ride. Then
So my family about and like, oh my God, you're so knowledgeable. I want to be you when I'm old. Like a
Well, don't-
consultant role, like.
don't rush,
yeah.
don't rush it, honey. It'll come fast enough.
Yeah, I was
You know
like, wow, I love it. I love the role. I'm like, it's good.
So you've seen the whole business through. and
Yeah.
through. That's what.
Yeah, although I'm telling you, everybody right now, in the market we're in right now and have been for the last 3 years. I've never seen anything like it, so,
Yeah.
I prior to this, you might say. Or I might have said, look, I pretty much have seen it all,
Mhm.
and I don't know where technology is gonna go ultimately as far as that goes, but. But no, this marketplace that we're in and. It's a tough market,
It really is.
it's, for you newer people, let's face it, when you have listing inventory that is so low, historic, I mean, it's just like, it's wacky. We were at lunch, Eileen was saying, it's a West Hartford thing. It was a conversation she was having with the town clerk, like, as part of the conversation, it was, and they're fighting for revenue, like what the hell's going on? Well, you don't have the number of residential closings happening that you had 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or even last year. You have available housing on the market, and it was like right now, we'll start with maybe 17, 18 homes available. Pre-pandemic,
Mhm.
it was like this time of year, there'd be 300, 350.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
Right? So I mean, this is gonna change, because
Yeah.
markets always shift and change, and the people that, one thing that we do know is the people that, because we've seen it play out and play out and play out, and we've been in existence now as a company long enough to see it play out. The people that just get down and dirty, just do the work, keep your head,
Right.
they come out of it when this market changes, their business will then exponentially grow
Mhm.
above beyond what it is. And I've seen iterations of that. Some of the teams, the Meali team or Chloe White's team or Sandy's team, I mean, teams that, that 2008, 2009, they were huffing and puffing.
Mhm.
But they were doing the work.
Right. And how do you form a team?
Oh, don't even worry about that at this point. That's-
That was you.
That would be that's down the road, Jessica.
Down the road, okay. Down the road.
Are you all set, John?
We're good. You could have left any time, Rolando.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Have
you.
a good,
Good
folks.
to see you.
Right,
I'm-
bye.
So outside of just NAR and all the emails you send out, how do you keep up with what's going on in the market? And what's going on as far as real estate goes?
Well,
Like you following the case and all the changes? And
oh,
all
yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, I subscribe to Inman News, which,
There we go.
and, it's probably about close to $300 a year for that subscription, but you get really up to the minute real estate information going on multiple times every day. You can pick and choose, how much you want to bury yourself into, but
Mhm.
but I think as far as an outside source that's not NAR,
Yeah.
sharing and being totally involved with the real estate industry,
Mhm.
Inman is,
That's it right there.
yeah.
There we go. And then Friday classes are pretty much, you have one coming up that's rental.